interesting life in South Route, and it wouldn't have been so much, but he's propped up by his wife, who is here, Mary, and thank you for getting this guy into town and keeping him straight for all these decades. Anyway, with that, we're just going to talk to Jerry today about those experiences, and almost in kind of that same format as an interview for a book. And I am thrilled that this is going to be on tape and a part of the archives. And anyway, if you welcome Jerry, come on up here, sir.
Thank you, Jerry.
Well, thank you, folks. It's a great honor to be asked to speak here. I'm a little out of my element, but but anyway, I will like to relate to you kind of the story of my life in Route County.
And I'm going to ask you to sit.
Okay, I'm going to get
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And
Can you hear without the mic all right, guys?
Yes.
are we all good?
Okay. I'll try to keep it. Anyway, my folks came to Route County in 1938. I was 4 years old. We're moving in from northeast Colorado. And my first memories of Route County were we topped out coming over the Gore, coming up here in our old Model A. And we were starting down a long grade toward where you cross Blacktail Creek. And anyway, it was raining like crazy. And anyway, my folks and 5 kids were in old Model A, and Dad was the old hand wiper. And anyway, it was muddy and the road was narrow. And here we met a car, and he was coming toward Denver, we were coming toward Yampa. And anyway, they couldn't pass, they'd met, and so they both jumped out to their cars, and just another guy, I have no idea who he was. But it kind of come to a little confrontation. They were both waving their arms and I was scared, what all might happen. And anyway, what they were trying to decide, Dad was trying to convince him that he could back downhill a heck of a lot easier than Dad could back uphill. And so Dad won the argument, I guess. Anyway, that guy backed down and they waved at each other as we met. But that was my first step into Route County. But anyway, I would like to relate just a little bit of our family history. What before Route County, what kind of people it took to not winter kill when we got here, and one thing and another. But anyway, so we'll go back to my mother was born in Russia. They were German people that had went from Germany into Russia. They were given land way back in the 1760s. They were given land, and there were huge colonies of these were Volga River Germans, they called them. And they owned their own land, governed themselves, each had about 40 acres. And if each time you had a son, why, he was given his roughly 40 acres. And then the last, when the old man was getting ready to die, why, he would will his 40 acres to the youngest son. And the girls, of course, got nothing. They were supposed to marry a guy that already had his. But anyway, they were a very successful colony, and they lasted a long time. Up the production made Russia a big exporter of grain instead of an importer. They served a great purpose over there. But anyway, my grandfather was in this Russo-Japanese war in Russian cavalry, and Russia got whipped in that. But anyway, So when he was coming back from this war on Eastern Russia, why they were horseback, of course. But anyway, there was lots of turmoil in every little village. They would stop and one thing and another. The Bolsheviks is starting, the communists were starting to raise hell all over the place. And so Grandpa sized her up and he decided that he best get out of Russia and get to Colorado, or to the United States. So at that time, you had to have a sponsor to get over here. And so Great Western Sugar Company out in eastern Colorado, they would sponsor big numbers. They had a quota to get into the United States. But anyway, they would sponsor a lot of these people for farm workers for the beet business out. And so that's what they sponsored my grandpa. And he brought his, sold everything he had back there and brought his good wife and 3 children. My mother was the oldest. She was 8 years old of those children. So she had lots of memories of Russia. And my granddad was 3rd grade education. He could speak 4 languages, very interested in politics and aggressive, good man. He grew 4 big, ended up with 3 great farms out in eastern Colorado there, and done what? Raised 9 kids. And anyhow, so anyway, when after they'd gotten here, they landed at Brush, Colorado, got there on the train. Well, I want to go over the ship passage first. My mother leaving Russia, okay, she can remember all the crying and leaving in the dark, you know, last farewell to all the families. And anyway, they rode a team and buggy, she can't remember how long, and they got onto a train, she can't remember how long, and anyway, then they got on a big ship, and they started to cross to come over here, in their little cabins, and anyway, they had this little chain that would turn this light on. That was her and her brothers. They spent the whole trip pulling on that little chain, you know, I mean, the light coming on. On a good days, where they could go up on deck and run around, and they give them some oranges, those kids, to play with, or they thought they's balls to play with. They'd never seen an orange. And anyway, so they're playing, well, they lost them overboard. Then anyway, then she could remember the Statue of Liberty, and then a train ride to Brush, Colorado. Yeah, she was 8 years old, like I say. But anyway, okay, unique coincidence. This was in 1912, and that was the same year and the same month the Titanic took off from Europe coming to the United States. And the Titanic didn't make it, but the immigrant ship did. And anyway, but that was us kids growing up, we knew the history, we'd learned a geography lesson, a history lesson, and one thing and another that other kids didn't learn until they was way up in school, you know what I mean. It was all memories. And anyway, they after they got over here to Brush, my grandpa was working for the sugar, for the beet business, working basically for different farmers, working their crops. And anyway, he had a brother that just wanted awfully bad to come over here to the United States. He had left 6 siblings back there in the end. But anyway, 6 siblings, and this one brother wanted to come to the United States awfully bad. and the quota was full. He couldn't get here, so he went. It was legal. He went to Canada and spent whatever time it took to become a citizenship. And then there was no restriction for him coming into the United States, so here he come. Okay, so here was the two brothers in the United States. This Uncle Dave, well, he had a sweetheart back in Russia, and so she was wanting to come over, so he sponsored her as a engaged person. She had her sponsor, you know, so she was legally could come, and they also had a sister that just wanted to come over here in the worst way. She was a young single girl. They was both about 20 years old probably, and only she couldn't get a sponsor, and so anyway. My grandpa and Uncle Dave, they had an old neighbor there, an old bachelor, but they asked him, would you marry our sister? And heck, yes, he would. So anyway, the sister, by the way, was noted to the day she died as a very rough talker, you know, very good vocabulary. So anyway, here comes these two young gals, and they get off the train, the brush Colorado, and immediately they're all organized and ready. Here they have a double wedding. And anyway, everything went good, and George, he became a plumber and lived a good life. And anyway, so years later, I've only met this Aunt Maritas 3-4 times at family funerals later in life, but she, some of the older folks were asking her at one of these occasions, what did you think coming over here? You're gonna marry a guy what you'd never seen in your life? And she just says, yeah, I was so excited, she said. I just looking forward to it so much. And she says, here I come over here, and here is this little Miss Tinkle. Loosely translated, that means shitty chicken. Anyway, it was successful. They raised 12 children. All right. So anyway, my dad had he was the first generation from Lithuania, and born in the United States, and they settled there in the Brush area. And Dad grew up just a day farm labor, you know what I mean. And he went to the Army, and he was in World War I, and went through basic training, got on the ship, headed for France. They was out 3 days, and armistice was signed, so they turned around and he come back to Fort Worth. And anyway, so my dad had leased a little place, you know. He was progressing from the day labor stuff to his own little outfit, and that's where he met Mom. They were both sharecropping like in that area. So that was 1924. And so children, they had their first years of their marriage were great. They were accumulating a little bit, and then depression and the drought, the Dust Bowl hit, and so they just flat went broke. And they'd heard about the lettuce and spinach up here, for all of us kids, and so they decided they was going to come to Routt County. But anyway, I was 4.5 years old at that time, and there was my memories. It was a great break in my life, that move from Fort Morgan to Routt County. Anything I can remember from Fort Morgan, I was 4.5 years or less of age, and then anything I remember after that, I was older. So anyway, the things I can remember before I was 4.5 was irrigating a little patch of corn, and there were, then when Dad would pull the water, there were little fish flopping. They were carp out of a ditch, you know what I mean? And so running barefoot up and down those ditches and picking up those little carp. And I can remember that, and I can remember my older brother and I, he was 7 years older than me. He was, we went out, Dad sent us out to fix the fence. And I can remember this prairie dog town, holes all over beside the fence. And so Jim was in the lead, and I was behind him tagging along. And anyway, I remember he jumps this prairie dog hole, and so I jumped it right behind him. And so he stopped, and here in front of him was a coiled rattlesnake beside the prairie dog hole. So Jim immediately stopped and looked around, and that hole we just jumped, that spooked another rattlesnake. He crawled up out of there. He was coiled and a rattling. Started to turn away from the fence, and there was a third hole there with, we had excited him a little bit, I guess. And anyway, so Jim threw the hammer at one and made him go in his hole, and we took off and headed for home. And then Dad cussed us because he forgot the hammer up. No, I had the greatest parents in the world. Okay, so anyway, we got to Routt County, and things were just awfully tough. There was a new man in the country, no work, you know what I mean, at that time anyhow. And so Dad put in some lettuce. He had a brother-in-law up at Moore Park up the river, and anyway, the lettuce had a pretty good crop, but anyway, there wasn't no money come our way on it. And so here was Dad, just really destitute going into winter, and he had rented a little place there. And when we got to Routt County, he had 5 children, 6 horses, 2 cows, and $1,750 worth of debt. What he lacked paying out there in eastern Colorado. And so anyway, he's hunting desperately for work, and he got a few-day job baling hay. At that time, the hay was all stacked loose, and they would bale it in the winter, and with an old stationary baler, pitch it out of the stack, and load a lot of it on box cars to be shipped out. But anyway, he'd get a day or two of work of that. But the only talent, or whatever you'd call it, he had, he was an excellent shot, and he was a great trapper. He was, he was a survivor through those Depression years. Why, everything was cheap on down, but the fur business was pretty good. There was a good market for fur. And so anyway, he started trapping for coyotes mainly. And anyway, so I know the first winter we were here, I was too young. I couldn't go to school, so I'd tag along with Dad wherever he went. And anyhow, so it was getting along, probably middle of March or maybe February, I don't know, along towards spring. And the fur was going out of prime, you couldn't catch it through shading time. And anyway, but the snow was a good crust on it, and he had some traps he was wanting to pull up at Moore Park. Now, it was, I would say, about 4 mile at least, airline. And so him and I walked on that crust, you know. That's still a great feeling to me. You wear overshoes all winter and stuff and get out on that snow, you can just fly, you know, and that's, but anyway, went up there and he'd caught a red fox, and so we skinned it out on he skinned it, just taking the hide home in these traps. And anyway, we started down through Moore Park, and it was getting well into the day by then, you know, the sun had warmed up, and Dad started breaking through. That snow was, it was deep on him, and I could skip around and not bother me, but anyway, so he told me it was a bad situation, could have been clear bad. But anyway, he told me to go down to the old Moore Park homestead there, and he remembered where his brother-in-law had lived in the summer. And anyway, there were some old bushel baskets where they'd bought fruit from the fruit peddlers, and he told me to get some of these basket lids, and he said there's a roll of binder twine in there too. And so anyway, brought those back, and he got them onto his feet, you know, enough to where we made it down to the county road about the forest boundary up there, and then we had a packed sled trail, other homesteaders going, you know, but that could have been a very dangerous situation. So anyway.
And you were, I'm just interjecting, you were about 5, 6 years old?
Well, let's see, I had to be probably 5. That was
before school.
Before, yeah. See, I probably turned 5 in December, and this would have been in like February, March when we was pulling stuff. So anyway, that was kind of a start. Dad rent these little places and plant lettuce and spinach. His only hope, if he could have found a steady job, he could never raise a family and retire that kind of debt at that time, you know, on day wages. And so anyway, his only chance in this world was to hit a lick with this lettuce and spinach. And there were people that did. If everything, plants were lined up right way, there were people hit a good, I mean, made some money off of that. But anyway, we weren't one of those. But anyway, it was a working out situation all the rest of my growing up. We worked everywhere we got a chance, and us kids included, and Dad kept going with his trapping a lot. His name got out a little bit, and he would, there were some, Kaufmans, Marshalls, different pretty good sized sheep men. They would bring him old coal ewes to, wouldn't pay their freight to Denver to sell them. And Dad would take those and use them for coyote bait and to set his traps, and he also would use strychnine pills. They were poison. You could buy this poison at the drugstore. And it wasn't one of these 1080s and those bad kind of stuff that carry, you know, if the magpie eats a coyote and it carries down the generation. The strychnine, I don't think was that way at all. It would kill the animal, but it was never lethal dose for anything like that. But he had so many tricks. I've talked to government trappers and different people later in life here, you know what I mean, that these coyotes in the winter, they over up in our country there especially, you got these old windswept ridges between the valleys, and they're bare, you know what I mean, pretty much. And those coyotes, that's very much enough to follow a ridge where it's easy walking. And this was one of his old tricks, what I've never heard anywhere else. Coyotes are very difficult to trap, very smart. But anyway, he could take, and on his horse, he would make these tallow pills with the strychnine in the center, soak them in blood, and then put them in a fruit jar. He could ride along, never get off his horse, find an old cow platter out on one of those windswept ridges, had him a willow stick, and he could, from his horse, lift it up just a little like that and poke one of those tallow balls under it. It would, average guy gone by, you'd never notice anything happen. But a coyote is a very alert, smart thing, and he comes down that ridge and he sees that that something has disturbed that. A mouse has crawled or something, he thinks, you know. So he looks, and by gollies, he here's this little poison pill, and he'll be laying 4 foot from there the next morning, you know. It was tricks what I've never heard of before or since, but he was good, and that sustained us a lot. I remember one time he would have been baling hay down here for crowners on Pleasant Valley, on the Lugons and some of that. They would bale hay in the winter. Anyway, Dad would get 2 cents a bale, and that didn't amount to too much, but it looked good. And anyway, he was home. Well, us kids were just coming home from school, and here Dad was just coming in with 3 coyotes, what he'd bailed all week. And he went out like on a Friday evening, set his bait, and next day he went out, and here he had 3 coyotes. Wayne Light, he had a fur farm, silver foxes and mink down here, and he was also a fur buyer. And anyway, so here he pulled into the yard, and so they dickered. He wanted to buy those coyote pelts, and Dad said, "Well, I ain't even got them skinned or, you know, tended to yet." Wayne says, "I'll help you." And anyway, they made an agreement. Dad had worked all week for $23 hay baling, and he got $24 for the 3 coyotes. That was first time in his life that he ever had 2 checks and neither one spent, you know. But anyway, no, it was just hubbing it tight all the way growing up. And anyway, our finally, actually the depression for us ended when I got out of high school. I got a job on a section crew. That was the first time in our history that we ever had any steady income, you know what I mean? And that helped. And I went on to the Army. And well, I've got to tell you a little about going to school first. We lived clear out in the country, like you say, uphill on both ways, you know what I mean, to get to school. But anyway, so sometimes we would ride, sometimes we would leave the car always down at the highway because our roads weren't plowed, and we'd catch a ride with the Vernon Deckers and some of those guys to go to school in a car. But a lot of time we would horseback it too, and this was during World War II. And anyway, I know they would brag on the radio, you know, the war effort out at Lowry Field here at Denver. They had progressed so far that they could fly a plane out of there a minute, you know what I mean, brag like that. And Dad would tell them, "Hell, that ain't nothing. I can send a kid a minute out of here." But anyway, one big change, what we saw with that, we'd go to school, and it was absolutely terrible, but go to school, we'd always pack our 22s because we might get a jackrabbit. We'd skin him and get a quarter, you know what I mean? That was our only cash flow. And so we would take always pack our gun. And anyway, it was never a question. We'd set them in mudroom when we got to school. The bolt had to be open. The shells had to be in another jacket pocket or something. Never heard of a school shooting or anything in my life until I got older. So,
Hey, you told
Sure.
me a story about your first job on the hay crew, too,
okay, this was back during the war again, and the place where I live now, all the young men were in the army, you know, or somewhere, and anyway, so all I was around was kids and old people, and the woolly place where we live now, since I've owned it, but anyway, that was leased by Huffstettlers for many years, and it's a good hay outfit. And anyway, so the neighbors, all the guys would go together to make a crew, to get enough men to make a crew. And I've tried many times since, but the Huffstettlers had a picture of us out there, you know, right out from my house there we were eating lunch, and there were 14 teams tied in that, you know, to the horse we tied him to a rake wheel or something, let him eat while we were eating. And anyway, 14 teams, not a tractor, in that little hayfield right out from our house. There's got one of those pictures shows that same field when it was in head lettuce and spinach, and my buildings are where I live now are in the background. But anyway, started in a wrenching business. I come back from the army and had some experience in there. I was in for a 2-year voluntary draft deal, but a small group of us were made a special forces unit after basic training. We were sent out in the desert. We didn't even know it at that time, Camp Irwin, California. There's just a small battalion there, 723rd Tank Battalion. And like I say, we were told we were specially selected. You don't always believe all the Army tells you. But anyway, so that we were going to be used in our A-bomb experiments. They were doing these nuclear tests. The Cold War was gone full-blown there, and the arms race was on between the United States and Khrushchev and those guys. But anyway, they were doing all this experimenting out there. So we went out there, drove our tanks through Death Valley, out into Area 51, top secret area, and they never lifted the secrecy till the year 2000. It was all classified material we had, and the big part of those people died of cancer. And as far as we know now, there were 2 of us still left, and we both got cancer. And last Christmas, when I made my annual call, why I can't get no response from Bill, so I might be the last survivor of that little escapade.
Can you kind of tell about that day and where they put you and how that whole thing went?
Yeah. Well, we were okay. They'd done a any number of experiments out there. Some of them were underground, some of them dropped at different distances, different sizes, all kinds. It was one grand experiment. And anyway, they had 3 mock villages built at different distances from the ground zero. The bomb was on a 500-foot tower, and it had 90 tons of steel. A ton is a lot of steel, but this is 90 ton. And this bomb on top of a 35,000 kiloton bomb, that's equivalent of 35,000 tons of TNT. And anyway, we were parked in tanks at 3 different distances. I was Able Company, we were the closest. And anyway, that was, we were 1,000 yards from ground zero. Periscopes all taped and one thing and another. And anyhow, we went through training galore. We knew all of the history, what they had of the A-bomb, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and knew every back alley in those towns before and after the blast. And anyway, so they set that thing off, and countdown would sit there all night, and it was fairly well chilled. You know, this was the 5th of May, 1955. Can I get some water?
One. There's something
Right
in
here,
the
Matt.
refrigerator.
But anyway, thank you.
You bet. Keep you talking for 40 minutes without a drink.
Yep. Am I supposed to shut up?
No. No, we hope you got 40 more.
Anyway, so they set that off, and you could, first impression was like deep underwater, pressure on you everywhere, and that old tank started creaking and moving. 49.5 tons of steel started going backwards, and so we, and the heat just hot. We broke from a pretty cold, long heat night into just a sweat like crazy, just that quick. And anyway, pulled the tape off the periscopes. I was in a driver's position, and here these yucca trees, those little desert Joshua trees, they all in flame. We were sitting in a forest fire, only one too thick tree. But anyway, hot, and anyway, then you could look, and here was ground zero itself, just a huge, ugly, boiling mass, and the mushroom was just starting to raise from that. And anyway, but here was this big, huge dust just coming across the desert. The light, the heat had traveled at the speed of sound, 186,000 miles a second. Sound, this was a shock wave, and that was coming at the 1092 feet per second. So you could watch this thing bubble and boil and wreathe around and coming straight across toward us. And when that hit, we were in not only sweating, couldn't breathe, it was so dusty you couldn't breathe. And in, well, 8 minutes, it'd been radio silence since the evening before, except with our battalion commander. And anyway, here he counted in, and how are you down there, Schalnus? I was by myself down in the driver's position instead of up in the turret with 3 other people, so we had no communication either. So they asked me, how's things down there, Schalnus? And I said, fine. Anyway, that was our first communication. And so anyway, then they called and said, move out. So we go out, take off just totally blind. You couldn't see from me to you. And anyway, pretty quick call come that able company, you're almost in ground zero, veer left. So we veered left and got out there quite a ways, and dust cleared and we gathered up out there. So then anyone was allowed to go back, and we had to go back. Some of us we had our instruments like Geiger counters and several different instruments what we worked with. But anyway, so we marched right straight back afoot into ground zero. This was within 30 minutes of the blast. Into ground zero itself, that 90-ton tower, there was not one twisted piece of steel. There was nothing. It had vaporized totally. And so then we would take all kinds of readings and stuff, and went through the mock villages. These villages were built like a normal American household, a TV and a dummy and sitting in the living, and different types of material though, most of them. And anyway, if you're ever gonna go in the A-bomb country, we'll go for a stucco house. They stand it better than anything else. A strange, I got to throw this out, but a strange thing, after my folks had left Russia, they kept in direct contact with their relatives over there from 1917 till about 1930, and the communists, when Stalin took over, all communication stopped out of there. So we didn't know for all those years, and they didn't know what had happened. But anyway, in 1993, when Gorbachev, when the Soviet Union collapsed, okay, well, here come a letter. The last known address of my grandpa, and from Russia. It was written in German, and anyway, so it ended up with an old, real senile old aunt of mine, and anyway, so anyways, she got word to him somehow or other. Anyway, here come a letter to me. So I am in, since 1993, I've had a great correspondence with these relatives in Russia. He's his second cousin. Our granddads were brothers, and I've got all of their history. And a unique thing, here's the 2 families world apart. He had played a very active role in their testing over there in the A-bomb. And he just marvels that I lived as long as I have, because I've got just some good letters. What he writes a book instead of a letter. Different people got killed, and they drilled a big hole over there. All of their tests were in Kazakhstan, out in that big desert country. And anyway, they drilled holes in the ground and put their A-bomb in there, a lot bigger A-bomb, 100,000 ton of TNT in that hole, and then sealed it all up with a concrete. I've got all the dimensions and stuff what he tells, but it blowed, he says, chunks of concrete, big as a good-sized building, good-sized room, and for over almost 5 miles. Chunk of concrete flying through there. Yeah, anyway, that was kind of a strange thing, you know, the two families that far apart and still be a. So let's see, where were we gonna go from there?
How
Yes,
about this? Can I redirect it? How about your first ranch over here in Yampa and how that whole thing?
Okay, the first, I got back from the Army, and we'd all pooled our money in one thing and another, and my dream was still to get a ranch. And I could see at the rate we was going why we wasn't gonna get it done. Dad had this little nucleus place, not paid for, and so anyway, at that time they were advertising for petroleum engineers in Saudi Arabia and different places like that, and you could make like $100,000 a year and bring most of that money home tax-free. And says I had the GI Bill. I said that's the avenue to my ranch. Well, so I enrolled in college, and anyway, I was going to come home hunting. So we got home went hunting, and Dad told me that Lewis Phillips, he owned, his family used to own a place what Matt has up here now, and old timers in the country, and he'd walked as an 8-year-old kid all the way from Missouri. But anyway, and he said that one that give Dad a little credit at the grocery store the first years we were here, and he's just a prince of a man. Anyway, he wanted to see me, so I stopped by there, and he says, real soft-spoken old gentleman, and he says, Jerry, I'd like to sell you that woolly place. And I said, well, I'm only lacking one thing, and that's money. So he said, how much can you come up with? And I knew what I had saved from Army time and little railroad money. I had an older brother that was out of college, and he was making a little money at that time, and I knew what I could borrow from him. And so anyway, I told him $5,000. I didn't even ask him what he's wanting for the place. He asked what I could come up with, and I told him. And he sat there, man. He said, I think that's enough.
Wow.
And so then he said he wanted to get $33,500 for it, and 30 years to pay at 3.5%. We signed our agreement on the napkin on the table, and I went and checked out of the Army and come back and went to work on the railroad again. We had our cash flow, we had a ranch, and every time I got an ounce ahead, you'd run down and buy a heifer calf, you know, to here again, adding on to the 2 old milk cows what Pops had. And so we went through our life that way. That was 1957 when I bought my first piece of ground. And then just not too many years, I seen how safe that was. We getting a few cow numbers built up, and bought another one, owner financed, and bought another one, owner financed, and I didn't even have a credit rating. Through a lot of those years, I didn't even have a checkbook. But anyway, it started working. My younger brother, we decided, he was still down in grade school, and we decided we was going to be partners, and that was the greatest partnership the world's ever seen. And anyway, so I worked on the railroad until he got out of high school, and then he went to work in the timber and kept a cash flow going. And anyway, through 11 transactions, we ended up with 2,135 acres of paid-for land and 2 good forest permits. And Routt County is a damn good place to live.
I know you don't like bragging on yourself, but maybe you could just talk a little bit about some of those boards you were on and some of those awards as we kind of pull things together here.
Okay, as we got 3 or 4 of those smaller places put together, and they were all owner financed, which was good. You know, I have 4 payments to meet, but we can handle them good and everything. But Louis Phillips again was the one that told me. He said, you can go to the Federal Land Bank Board. They're a great place to borrow money. The office was here at Steamboat Springs, and it was, their CEO was Art Bogue. He used to be our school principal up at Yampa. And when I was in the grade school, and his wife, Lucille, she was a substitute teacher for me. But anyway, Lucille went on and they got some building. She was highly instrumental with the college down here. And through Louis' influence or thoughts, we had him paid off. But anyway, I combined several small ranch loans into one with the Federal Land Bank. Okay, and when you borrow from the Federal Land Bank, you bought so many shares based on the volume of your loan. And so in a few years, I don't know, they had a nomination board, so they called me and wondered if I would run on Federal Land Bank Board. This covered 5 counties at that time, our association. And so I told them, sure, you know, that was a good way to learn more about financing. And so it was one of the greatest educations I've ever had. But anyway, I started here. We had five counties. Then in a short time, we merged with Jackson County. And anyway, in just a few years, they made me chairman of the loan committee. It was a 5-man board, but anyway, and so then in like 1980s, we had a big crunch in agriculture on the western slope especially. People were waiting in gas lines and that type of thing. And anyway, it was some lean years, so lots of property changed hands through those 1980s. But anyway, I was on that board, and we done an awful lot of work to keep the rancher on the ranch, forgive a lot of money, and picked up, we had 13 counties. We took all the western slope and Larimer, Weld, Denver, Boulder counties on the eastern slope. So we were the biggest association by far in our district was Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Colorado. And anyway, our little association, instead of dying through all those foreclosures, those lean years, we actually grew and expanded and merged with some broker, and very educational, good board. Learned. Only time in my life I've ever got to sit on the banker's side instead of the borrower's side. Yeah, and then I don't remember when That would have been like in the 80s, I'm pretty sure. They had this grazing advisory board. We had gotten 2 permits accumulated by that time. And so each ranger district would elect a cattle representative and a sheep representative. And they had the grazing advisory board. And so our job was to, the green wave was emerging, getting stronger all the time, and a lot of these young rangers were come in, the only thing they knew was cut your permits, you know. I mean, gotta get this straightened out. And we served as we weren't an authority-making board, but we were like an arbitration board that emerged with Medicine Bow, so we had 2 national forests to work with. But anyway, we would solve a lot of problems, head off a lot of problems, you know, get both sides. In other words, it wasn't just talking from hysteria. There were a lot of us guys were probably knew more about grazing than those young rangers did, you know. And other times it didn't too, because no one's always right. But it was a very successful board. But that was, there again, good education.
Well, we've talked to you an hour. We're going to give you a break. God, thank you guys so much.
When I was a kid, growing up, I had a good one over Doc Marshall up there, and he run, I don't know, like 800 ewes. And so he would, I would get to stay out of school each spring for lambing, and we would range lamb, you know, and I would get the bum lambs, the ones that you wouldn't claim or whatever. And we had a couple milk cows at home, so we could feed them. But I would get the bum lambs, and we would trail them up just on the side of high country up there. And that was just another job of growing up. And by keeping those bum lambs, I grew those. When we got our first place, we grew them into 150 ewes. And we kept them for years and years. And we would do our own shearing, and we just, in other words, anything that takes 3 things to make a ranch run: capital, management, and labor. We didn't have capital. So you make the others cover it.
Jerry, I have a question. So when your folks came from Russia, was their last name Schalnus?
No.
What was it?
That was my dad's side from Lithuania.
Okay.
They were Fooses.
How would you spell?
F-O-O-S. F-O-O-S.
Okay.
Yeah. There were 3 of them that came over and 6 of them that stayed back.
Thank you.
That was 1912. Good. Gary.
I got your check yesterday, so I thought I would bring this today. That's your card for your 50-year membership in the American Legion. He's been a great addition to the
Amen.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.